Born in 1792, Percy B Shelley was very imaginative and loved dark stories. He also experimented with science and was the romantic poet of that time with the most radical ideas. He was small and people bully him, however, he was very provocative as well. He wanted to fight against oppression. He was against hierarchies and was devoted to the idea of social revolution. As a matter of fact, Shelley was expelled from Oxford for his radical ideas, because of the pamphlet The Necessity of Atheism, 1811. He was interested in making debates, and there she discovered Mary Wollstonecraft, whom he would later marry. Mary, as well as Percy, were expelled from their family, and they lost economical sustainment. Percy was committed to the idea of freedom, so they traveled to Pisa, Italy, France and Switzerland, among other places. Percy had his demons and was afraid of not succeeding after his death. However, Mary published his poems after he was dead, and it was at this moment that he became famous. He died drawn, and he thought that to be a good poet he had to merge with nature, and become part of it. Percy as well as other romantics abolished the idea of the traditional religious authorities, as he was a strong defendant of freedom, and replaced it with natural theology.
He wrote Ode to the West Wind when he was in Italy to ask the West Wind for inspiration so that he could replace his obsolete ideas with new ones that would bring change. It is a poem with tremendous musicality. We need to take into account the formal aspects as well as the content, as he paid a lot of attention to the structure. Odes were used to convey a serious message, philosophical and political issues usually. The structure of odes usually consists of 3 sections: strophe, antistrophe and epode. At first, in the strophe, the poem gives you one side of the coin. In this case, he addresses the west wind and explains its effects in nature. Then the antistrophe is just the other side of the coin. In this case, he addresses to himself. And finally, the epode, which is the final conclusion, the whole coin, where he expresses his wish to merge with the wind. Thesis, antithesis and synthesis. As previously mentioned, we have to pay attention to the structure used as he blends the terza rima, the style used by Dante, with the Elizabethan sonnet, which was typical of England. Therefore, we have a combination of 2 classical structures, one from Italy where he was living at the moment and the other from England where he was born, to create a totally new structure. So we can see a dual merging in the structure, terza rima plus Elizabethan sonnet, as well as in the epode where the poet himself wants to merge with the wind. A lot of romantic themes are present in the poem. Nature is one of the main themes, as we can see the effect of nature on the ground, sea and air. It is the most powerful element that exists and brings change. Shelley implies the idea that we should behave like nature. The idea of the sublime is also present, as the west wind is described as a destroyer and preserver. Moreover, the west wind is linked to the idea of mutability, as seeds are moved by the wind and become flowers, winter becomes spring. Apart from nature, the poetic eye is really present, as he wants the west wind to raise him, to provide him with inspiration and let his ideas evolve, as well as spread his ideas for a change. He talks about his personal emotions, and he wanted the wind to help him achieve his prophecy of change. Apart from this, Keats, Coleridge and Shelley shared the power of imagination, as the 3 poems happen in their minds. Just like in Coleridge or Keats's poem, his own imagination has to set off, but when it works, he has gone from a state of near death to a state of hope, so we can see the healing power of poetry. Finally, another key topic, as previously mentioned, is freedom. The importance of the revolution to break free of constraints, the idea that the old has to die to let the new come. The west wind brings change and is free, as it cannot be trapped. Analyzing the poem in depth, the first stanza deals with the power of the west wind in the ground. At first he speaks about the leaves dead, driven like ghosts. We have the use of nature imagery throughout the whole poem, and in this case, he might be referring to the old pages of a book, and when compared to a ghost, we understand that the pages can no longer be used, as they correspond to the old traditions. As a matter of fact, he describes the dead leaves of the autumn, a period of change, as if they were sick, pestilence-stricken. Moreover, apart from describing the destructive power of the wind, he also talks about the preserver power that it has, as the wind helps the cycle of nature. In fact, the dead leaves are replaced by seeds which are moved by the wind, and this way spring can take winter's place. Shelley wants to imply the idea that we have to die to truly change. He concludes this stanza with a couplet addressing both the destructive and preservative power of nature. He uses the same structure of the ode for the first stanza at a micro level: the thesis, destroy, antithesis, preserve, and synthesis, both. Moreover, in the second stanza, he praises the power of the west wind in the air. He refers to the wind as violent, steep skies commotion, and as a really powerful source of energy, which brings death, dying year, vast sepulchre. The west wind is directly connected to the idea of the sublime as wonderful, but at the same time really dangerous, as it can bring storms, black rain, and fire. Apart from this, we have a biblical reference to angels as well as a reference to Eminad, which are divine savage spirits that the author compares to the west wind. Furthermore, the third stanza, which is the last stanza of the strophe, praises the power of the west wind in the sea. He refers to the Mediterranean because it symbolizes the old traditions, and it is where he lives. Then he talks about old places and towers, which are overgrown. Here the poem praises the destructive power of the wind, and it is described as sweet. Again, we can see the idea of the sublime, the idea of mutability, and the need to destroy in order to create. The first three stanzas end with the poet addressing the wind so that it can hear his prayers.